In this video we're going to show you how to stitch out a border block. So here's an example of a border block. This is the large size. And so we have all our supplies gathered. We have our quilting thread and a matching bobbin, our water soluble and embroidery bobbin thread, our prepared wool, our backing fabric and front fabric, and of course our cute little prairie points. These are optional, but we think they look adorable. So let's begin stitching our border block. So the first step for our border block is you're going to put your battleizer in the hoop. You're going to put embroidery bobbin thread in the bobbin and water soluble thread in the needle. And then the first step is to sew a placement stitch so that we know where to put our fabric and our wool. So this is our step one. Step two, we placed our optional wool right over the top of that placement stitch, and we're going to continue with the same thread in the needle and the bobbin, and we're going to sew the wool batting to the battleizer. So our edges have been pressed, our presser foot's in the highest position, and it just does a cute zigzag stitch all around the entire block. For step three, we're going to take the hoop off the machine. This is the back of the hoop. And we're going to place our backing fabric so it's centered right over the placement stitch. And then I'll flip the hoop over, put it back on the machine, and I'll also put the fabric for my border fabric for the front also on there. So here's my fabric, my border fabric. So I'm going to lay it over the wool, and I'm going to make sure it's centered. And then we're just going to sew a tack down stitch to hold all the layers together. And this is still with water soluble thread in the needle and embroidery bobbin thread in the bobbin. And I'm just going to make sure that the fabric stays nice and smooth. There we have it. Step four is our quilting step. So I have matched my needle and bobbin thread. I'm going to do a needle down and a needle up. I also have turned off my thread cutter, and that way it makes for a nice cleaner looking back. So now I'm going to just do a few stitches and trim my thread tail, and then it can finish our quilting for us. Time to add our prairie points to the side. So just make sure that the raw edge of your prairie point is about 1/4 of an inch past the basting stitch on this side. Also so that the tips are approximately 1/4 of an inch at the top, and they are going to overlap just slightly. So I like to have my first one placed so that as the presser foot is coming over it, it will glide right over the top of that one. So you're going to want to make sure your top prairie point is going to be placed so it's a little bit over the top of this one. If you placed it this way, as the presser foot stitches from top to bottom, the presser foot could grab the fold of that and kind of make a mess. So make sure you have it placed like this, and then with the same thread we're going to stitch the seam. The other thing is, placement wise, almost forgot to tell you, you kind of have a natural place of where to put those prairie points with that quilting that's right there. So you're going to line it up with that and 1/4 of an inch past the basting stitch on the left, and let's sew the seam. So there it is. There's my seam that holds the prairie points in place, and again the prairie points are optional, but they sure are cute. The last page of the instructions for the border blocks will show you how to trim each of the sides, and it depends on where the block's going to go, so you might want to look carefully at that. And you're going to use a trimmer by George on some sides, and on other sides you're going to do a 1/4 inch through all the layers on this side where the binding is attached. And there's additional instructions you'll need to read depending on the size block you're doing for how wide to cut it right there. So take a look at last page of instructions, and I'm sure that you will get them all trimmed perfectly.